everyone, it's Debbie with doitlikedebbie.com, a lifestyle blog on helping you to do more and save more. I am also documenting my immigration story, so if you are like me and filing the I-130 to bring your spouse from a different country into the US, then please go ahead and take a look. We can all find value in sharing our experiences, our processing times and whatnot, so I'll just continue to be documenting. There's a lot of people who are sharing tidbits about their immigration process, and it really just helps the collective. In today's video, I'm talking about the documents that you'll provide for supporting documentation for the I-130 to prove a bona fide marriage. Now, the guidelines on the USCIS.gov website give parameters but are a little bit vague, so it's up for interpretation. It's up to you to show a range of different forms of proof to really show the timeline of your relationship and that it's legitimate. So if you're filing the I-130, it means that you are married. If you have not gotten married yet, you could choose the route of the I-130 after you are married, or if you're just fiancés, you might want to go, say, the K1 fiancé visa route. But this one, the I-130, triggers either the K3 marriage visa or the spousal visa, the IR1 or the CR1, the conditional resident or the immigration visa to get your spouse into the country. So this is a huge step in your process of trying to be together. So it's a really exciting one. It can be a tedious one, but just make sure that you're meticulous in gathering all your documents and your evidence. You can start way before your marriage and just start collecting things. So by the time that you do get married, you're not wasting time trying to collect documents or forms of proof from everywhere, and you can just, send off the I-130. So today, again, like I said, we're talking specifically about supporting documentation. Of course, with that being said, there's other things that you would need to provide in your packet. It would be the I-130 itself, the I-130A, which is mostly information about your beneficiary or foreign spouse, and they do not need to sign it if they are living abroad, but if you do happen to get married here in the US and you are, say, together, then they can go ahead and sign it. But just make sure that when you submit, you are signing the I-130 or it will get immediately rejected. And then there's other things like you as the petitioner proving that you are a US citizen with something like a passport would be your best bet. And then there is the whole thing of the supporting documentation. So I'm going to be referencing my package. I submitted something like this, and these are actually all my copies that I made before I sent the originals off. Well, not the original things like my marriage certificate, but just like the original printouts of all my evidence. And I assembled it like how they want, with a 2-hole punch at the top just for easy access. Immigration doesn't like staples. You're just making their day longer and everyone's processing time slower if you're doing, staples, so don't do that. So like I said, USCIS is pretty vague as far as what they're requiring for supporting documentation, but your job is to really give a range. So to give a timeline of your relationship, putting you as the couple in a lot of different settings, whether that's traveling, visiting family members together, just to really legitimize the relationship so it's not like they are skeptical. What I did was I started with a signed cover letter for this particular section of the supporting documentation for the bona fide marriage. I laid out a bunch of different types of proof, and then of course I dated and signed the bottom. I included my address, and I just wanted to paint a good picture, and I also wanted to give them kind of a table or a guideline of all the things that they would be looking at, so they're not just seeing a whole bunch of miscellaneous scans or printouts and wondering what's going on. This just kind of assists you in painting a really good picture, and it labels everything so that the immigration officer who's processing your application has an easier time understanding, and hopefully, not to say that it's going to speed up your application because times get processed by priority date, but it'll be a smooth account and it'll be easy for them to then upload digitally, since nowadays everyone is getting the electronic filing. Even if you submitted paper like we did, USCIS is now scanning all of your documents up into an online account. So the different types of proof that I provided give a good range. It was including joint ownership, joint financial assets, joint responsibility for financial liability and welfare, proof of shared activities, and friends and family affidavits of support. So I'll be getting a little bit more into each of these. So under joint ownership, these are things that are like addressed to you as the couple. So it's not like you are two separate entities, but one combined. So that includes cards to both of us from friends and family. I did a couple of black and white copies of Valentine's Day cards that we received together as a couple, and holiday cards from friends and family. So, whoa, something, knocking myself in the face, something like that is totally fine. Receipts of gifts, so also establishing you guys as a couple. Naturally, you might want to send each other gifts. Again, it's a little bit harder to send gifts when you're international because there's like hefty shipping fees and whatnot. But at the beginning of our relationship, my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, he sent me some roses. So I had him forward me via email his electronic receipt from back then. And that was like more than a year ago. So that gave like definitely a timeline range for the immigration officers to look at. The next part of the supporting documentation that I sent was joint financial assets, and this part is a little bit harder, especially if you've been long distance for the entirety of your relationship so far, just like my husband and I. But I did call around to do your research ahead of time, and we were able to open up a joint savings account at Wells Fargo here in the United States. So when we got married, my husband came in on a tourist visa, and you can do that as long as you then intend to leave and not immigrate at that moment. As long as you both have a form of a credit card, doesn't matter what bank it's from, credit or debit card, and then some identification, so passports sufficed in this instance. For Wells Fargo, luckily my husband didn't need a social security number. I'm sure that, you know, once he is here and living with me, we can update his profile then. But for the time being, they didn't require it at Wells Fargo, so that's a good thing. Otherwise, it would be like a catch-22 situation where like no bank, no social security, no social security, no bank, that kind of, you know, run around. And then if you do any kind of like mild investing, or you have a Roth or like a SEP IRA, or say a 401k, any kind of things where you are invested, you should go ahead and list your spouse as the beneficiary. So that's what I did. It basically just shows USCIS that you will be financially responsible for your spouse, and that you are doing the work to try to make sure that they are financially secure, and they're not going to be a risk to public charge, or most people, if it was a fraudulent marriage, they just wouldn't go through those kinds of measures. So by doing that, it proves to them that, hey, like this is serious. The next section of supporting documentation for the bona fide marriage is a little bit similar to the previous one, but it's joint responsibility for financial liability and welfare. Earlier this year, I had a medical procedure done, and my husband wired me some money through PayPal. So we were able to then electronically log into our accounts, and then I was able to print out that receipt with the timestamp or the date, and then the transaction ID, and then obviously him as the sender and me as the recipient. I also started a new job a few months ago, so I was able to add my husband's name onto the life insurance as a beneficiary. So I got copies of that through my employer. And then the other thing too was I was able, with one of my credit cards, to add my husband on as an authorized user. I blacked out like the card series so that no one can go charging my card, but then it just does say his name on there, and it gives like the whole authorized user sheet for verification, also with our address on there. And just kind of like the title indicates, the joint responsibility for financial liability and welfare, you're basically combining your assets and, you know, being financially responsible for each other's well-being regardless of where you are both residing. And it's that combination of like means and assets that paints a good picture for USCIS. And one big section that I forgot to mention earlier, but is a huge part of the supporting documentation of the bona fide marriage, would be all things wedding related. Document literally everything you can. So we submitted pre-wedding planning messages back and forth. I took screenshots of our evites, so we didn't do any hard copy invitations. It was all electronically online with online RSVPs. So I printed out the invitation and a few of the comments of my friends that wrote in RSVPing and leaving comments for us as the couple. I also included a signed contract of some of the wedding day vendors, including the photographer, the videographer, and I did a few invoices for catering. So we had a brunch reception and I had the invoice from Whole Foods as part of the packet. You'll also want to include receipts. So we included my groom's ring purchase, and you can do things like bridal veil, shoes, flower girl basket, anything like that. Just receipts that are wedding related. You will definitely want to include photos. That's the fun part anyways. You'll want to include photos of the wedding day, and also be sure to write captions. It's not like you have to go and run over to CVS or Walgreens and print out a whole bunch of like elaborate 4x6s. We just printed it on regular photo paper, but we made it in color printing so that it was a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, and it was very clear, because sometimes it's hard to see with black and white when the colors are dark or something like that. Just make sure that your wedding photos, even if they're on regular 8x11 paper, that they're at least in color. And then of course you'll want to include captions just to kind of explain to the immigration officer that's doing your application of what kind of went down. Also, with the whole wedding portion, we included social media screenshots of like my name change once I did that. And then, you know, like from our profile, you can see friends that liked it or people that commented on it, just to kind of build like a social validity for the officer when they're looking at your application. We got a few wedding cards for gifts, so I made copies of those because they were also written to both of us as the couple. And then one envelope that was postmarked and addressed to both of us. So it went through the post office, it had the postmark label on it, and I think immigration likes to see that kind of stuff too. Next up, in supporting documentation for the bona fide marriage, proof of relationship and shared activities. So this is more fun stuff. We submitted a whole bunch of travel documentation. So this would be for airfare, train tickets. I even had one Airbnb review that listed both of us in the review, our names. So that was nice. And I just made sure that every single trip that we've ever been on together, I had one piece of evidence for each. And this is really important, especially if you're long distance and you've been long distance the entirety of your relationship. Really document those trips and give evidence. You don't want to overwhelm the immigration officers, but as long as you're having a few really solid pieces of evidence per trip, then that should really get you a long way. We also have a bunch of screenshot conversations. Primarily, we correspond via Facebook Messenger, but we also do it through WhatsApp and Instagram or email. But anyways, we did take a whole bunch of screenshots from Facebook Messenger, since that's our main mode of communication. We just labeled everything, so it gave a timeline of the relationship since the beginning. And I pulled a few different conversations from like each month since we first got together. You'll want to pull conversations like something about the groceries or how your day was or how this family member is doing, or just like day-to-day conversations to establish you as a normal couple that cares about normal, you know, everyday things. And obviously, or maybe not obviously, I don't know, but you don't want to slant too sexual or maybe like too romantic. I'm not sure how that's going to read to the officers, or like if it's going to be off-putting. But if you're just talking about things like the weather, or you went shopping today, or you know, like my mom is out walking the dog, just like the things that you would think are mundane or boring are actually really telling of a normal relationship, and you should definitely include that and also give a range of timeline. As I mentioned before, we talk amongst a whole bunch of different social platforms, so whether that's like Instagram or Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, I got screenshots from each just to kind of show the diversity of, and to show the officers that we are in constant communication through whatever means possible. And even to like, we take photos of each other on FaceTime or whatnot, since we FaceTime every single day. So you're more than welcome to include a few of those. I put them more in like the photo category rather than the screenshot of conversation category, just because the photos also then needed to have a caption accompanying it. After we got married, my dad had set up a group chat on WhatsApp with me and my husband and my mom and himself, and it was like titled like family or something, and I submitted that just to show that my husband is now a part of my family. As far as submitting photos, you obviously don't want to send a million, like an explosion, and especially you don't want to send ones that look very similar. You'll want to give, again, a good range, a whole bunch of different activities. Anytime you can include other people in your photo, it's always better for you. Obviously, try to avoid too many selfies of just the two of you guys, because obviously you can take that from anywhere. Limit the selfies, and then also with each photo that you submit, do have a caption that says the when, the where, with who, if there's other people in the photo, especially if they're significant, like they're your best friend, and the what. So like, say it's your spouse's brother's birthday and you're celebrating together or something like that, you'll want to include those kind of details for the officer. Finally, you'll want to wrap up all the supporting documents with affidavits of support. Now, these are pretty easy to get, especially when you have friends and family who can vouch for the validity of your relationship. They should be more than happy to do one. It's just a matter of them. And there's a lot of different cover letter templates online that you can look at. I can include one in the link below, actually, just for easier access. But basically, like, you'll want them with their affidavit of support to just paint a picture and kind of give sort of a written summary of everything that you've submitted thus far as all that supporting documentation that we were just talking about. For my husband and I, because we've been long distance throughout our relationship, the affidavits of support that I got, one from one of my best friends and one from my dad, just kind of further validates the relationship. It mentions how we interact with each other on a day-to-day basis, like, you know, messaging all the time, FaceTiming for an hour every day. So it's just, don't think that you can leave this one out. I really think this one's important. It just kind of bookends the entire supporting documentation portion of your I-130. It just gives USCIS a final insight into your relationship. I think when your friends and family can verbally articulate that for them, it's really important. So the affidavits of support, they don't need to be notarized, but they need to come from US citizens, and it needs to include name, passport, and date of birth and city of birth. So those are crucial, and you can put them all at the end. And don't forget to sign everything, even your cover letters. So sign your I-130, sign the cover letter too, and any kind of riders or additional information that you have. Every single page should just have some kind of like signature on it in a black pen. You know, it doesn't take very much to sign something, so make sure you do it. And just remember to supply captions for pretty much every single piece of evidence that you are submitting. And in my table of contents for the supporting documentation, I also put how many pages, so they would know what kind of thing it was, how many pages, and when they actually went to that piece of supporting documentation, I also had captions there for them, so they would know exactly what kind of proof this was and why it's important. Then from there, it's a waiting game. I'm in it too, and every single day I'm like on something like Visa Journey, just trying to see if I can get any ounce of additional information. Just make sure that you give it like 7 glance overs before you actually submit it, just because you want to prepare the best documents and the best package that you can, so that you can avoid any kind of request for evidence which cause huge delays, because ultimately we just want to be with the person that we love, and anything that we can do to eliminate variables, then that's better for us. But it's a waiting game and we're all in it together. So in the meantime, I'm gonna try to be patient. It's not my strong suit. We'll be patient together. If you have any comments or questions, please write in below. Check out my videos, check out other people's videos, just for peace of mind, for information, for commiseration, whatever it needs to be. I look forward to hearing about people's notice of actions and approvals. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.